In a fiery address, PF legal heavyweight Makebi Zulu has challenged President Hakainde Hichilema to lead the state funeral of late President Edgar Lungu as a matter of national honor. But will HH respond, or is this request too politically charged? As Zambia mourns the late President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, the question of who will lead his state funeral has become deeply political. In this breaking report by InspirAfrica official, we examine Makebi Zulu's strong public statement, his demand for President HH to take responsibility, what Zambians are saying about state protocols, the growing tension between UPND and PF during the mourning period. Is this a simple call for respect or a deeper political battle? 1. Makebi Zulu's strong public statement. Makebi Zulu, a prominent Zambian lawyer and politician, has emerged as a central figure in the controversy surrounding the funeral arrangements for former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, who passed away on June 5, 2025 in South Africa. As the spokesperson for the Lungu family, Zulu has made several bold and provocative statements, particularly targeting the UPND administration led by President Hakainde Hichilema (HH). His remarks have ignited a firestorm of debate both within Zambia and internationally due to their critical tone and the sensitive nature of the issue. Context of Zulu's statements. Zulu's public statements primarily revolve around the Lungu family's dissatisfaction with the Zambian government's handling of the late president's funeral arrangements. According to reports, the family has accused the government of insincerity, deceit, and prioritizing political optics over dignity in managing the process. Specifically, Zulu has claimed that it would be a mockery for the UPND administration to preside over Lungu's burial, citing a breakdown in trust between the family and the government. These statements were made in various interviews, including one with South African broadcaster SABC on July 3, 2025, where Zulu emphasized that the relationship between the Lungu family and the government had deteriorated to the point of making state involvement in the funeral unacceptable. ZambianObserver.com ZambianObserver.com. Zulu's role as the family spokesperson has placed him at the forefront of a legal and political battle. The Lungu family has taken the matter to the High Court in Pretoria, South Africa, where they are contesting the Zambian government's efforts to repatriate Lungu's body for a state funeral. Zulu has argued that the family's decision to handle the burial privately stems from Lungu's own wishes and the government's alleged mistreatment of the former president during his post-presidency years. He has also highlighted financial struggles faced by Lungu, including difficulties in paying medical bills, which he claims were exacerbated by the government's actions, such as the temporary suspension of Lungu's benefits for engaging in active politics. ZambianObserver.com ZambianObserver.com. Key points of Zulu's statements. Criticism of government conduct. Zulu has accused the Zambian government of dishonesty and backtracking in negotiations regarding the funeral. He claims that initial agreements with the government were undermined by actions that eroded trust. ZambianObserver.com. Assertion of family rights. Zulu has repeatedly emphasized that the Lungu family, not the state, has the ultimate authority over the burial arrangements. He argues that Lungu's body belongs to the family and that the government's insistence on a state funeral disregards the family's wishes and Lungu's legacy. ZambianObserver.com. Legal stance. As a lawyer, Zulu has been named in a lawsuit filed by Zambia's Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha in the Gauteng Division of the High Court in Pretoria. The lawsuit seeks to prevent Lungu's burial in South Africa and mandates his repatriation to Zambia. Zulu has asserted that no one will have access to Lungu's body until the matter is resolved in court. ZambianObserver.com. Political implications. Zulu's statements have also carried political undertones, with some interpreting them as an attempt to galvanize support for the PF and portray the UPND as insensitive or oppressive. He has suggested that the government's actions reflect a broader pattern of targeting Lungu and his associates, further fueling political tensions. ZambianObserver.com. Analysis of Zulu's approach. Zulu's statements are notable for their directness and confrontational tone, which have both amplified the controversy and polarized public opinion. As a seasoned lawyer and former member of parliament from Malambo constituency, Zulu is no stranger to political and legal battles. His background as a PF member and a vocal defender of Lungu's presidency, including his controversial support for Lungu's third-term bid, adds a layer of complexity to his role. Critics argue that his statements risk turning a moment of national mourning into a political spectacle, potentially deepening divisions in Zambia. Lusakatimes.com ZambianObserver.com. Zulu's decision to speak out publicly, particularly through international media like SABC, suggests a strategic move to gain sympathy for the Lungu family's position and pressure the Zambian government. However, his approach has also drawn criticism for lacking evidence to substantiate some claims, such as Lungu's alleged last wishes regarding his funeral. Without verifiable documentation or recordings, these assertions have been questioned by some Zambians, who view them as potentially inflammatory or politically motivated. ZambianObserver.com. Impact of Zulu's statements. Zulu's remarks have had a significant impact on the national discourse. They have escalated tensions. By framing the government's actions as a mockery and accusing it of deceit, Zulu has heightened the already strained relationship between the PF and UPND. This has led to public debates about the government's intentions and the family's rights, sparked legal proceedings. His insistence on private repatriation and burial has led to a legal standoff in South Africa, complicating the funeral process and delaying closure for Zambians mourning Lungu's death. Divided public opinion. While some Zambians support the family's right to control the burial, others see Zulu's statements as divisive and an attempt to undermine the government's authority. Zambianobserver.com. In summary, Makebi Zulu's public statements have positioned him as a polarizing figure in the controversy over Lungu's funeral. His role as the family's spokesperson has amplified the issue's visibility, but also raised questions about the balance between grief and political strategy. 2. Makebi Zulu's demand for President HH to take responsibility. Zulu's statements include a direct call for President Hakainde Hichilema to take responsibility for what the Lungu family perceives as the government's mishandling of the funeral arrangements. This demand is rooted in the family's belief that the UPND administration has not acted in good faith and has failed to respect Lungu's legacy and the family's wishes. Nature of the demand. Zulu has specifically criticized President Hichilema for what he describes as a lack of transparency and sensitivity in dealing with the funeral. He has argued that the government's push for a state funeral, which would involve military honors and ceremonial rites, disregards Lungu's personal wishes for a private burial in Zambia. Zulu has also suggested that the government's actions are motivated by a desire to control the narrative around Lungu's legacy rather than to honor him genuinely. Zambianobserver.com. In one of his more pointed remarks, Zulu stated, "This is not a presidential funeral, it's a state funeral, and the president is not the state," implying that Hichilema should not personally oversee the arrangements, as his involvement would undermine the family's authority and Lungu's dignity. This statement has been interpreted as a direct challenge to Hichilema's leadership and an attempt to separate the president's role from the state's obligations. Context of the demand. The demand for Hichilema to take responsibility must be understood within the broader context of Zambia's political landscape. Lungu and Hichilema have a history of rivalry, with Hichilema defeating Lungu in the 2021 presidential election after years of political competition. During Lungu's presidency, 2015 to 2021, Hichilema faced significant challenges, including arrests and allegations of persecution by the PF government. The Lungu family and PF supporters have claimed that Hichilema's administration has continued to target Lungu post-presidency, including through the suspension of his benefits and alleged restrictions on his access to medical care. Zambianobserver.com. Zulu's demand for accountability is also tied to specific grievances. Breakdown in negotiations. Zulu has refuted claims by the government that meaningful negotiations have occurred, stating that talks collapsed due to the government's inconsistent behavior. Zambianobserver.com. Legal interference. The family views the government's legal action in South Africa, led by Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, as an overreach of state power. The lawsuit seeks to compel the repatriation of Lungu's body, which the family sees as an attempt to override their wishes. Zambianobserver.com. Perceived political motives. Zulu has accused the government of using the funeral as a public relations exercise to bolster its image rather than genuinely mourning Lungu. Zambianobserver.com. Implications of the demand. Zulu's call for Hichilema to take responsibility has several implications. Political pressure. By directly addressing the president, Zulu is attempting to hold Hichilema personally accountable for the government's actions, potentially rallying public and international support for the family's position. Legal strategy. The demand aligns with the family's legal efforts in South Africa to assert control over Lungu's remains. By framing Hichilema as responsible for the impasse, Zulu strengthens the family's case for private management of the funeral. Public perception. The demand has fueled debates about Hichilema's leadership style and the UPND's handling of sensitive national issues. Some Zambians view it as a legitimate call for accountability, while others see it as an attempt to politicize a moment of mourning. Zambianobserver.com. Critical analysis. Zulu's demand for Hichilema to take responsibility is a calculated move that blends legal, moral, and political arguments. However, it has also been criticized for its lack of specificity and evidence. For instance, Zulu has not provided concrete examples of how Hichilema personally undermined the funeral arrangements, relying instead on broad accusations of deceit and insensitivity. This has led some analysts to argue that the demand is more about scoring political points than addressing substantive issues. Zambianobserver.com. Moreover, the demand overlooks the legal and cultural complexities of a state funeral in Zambia. As a former head of state, Lungu's burial is governed by national protocols that mandate government involvement, including military honors and burial at a designated site like Embassy Park. By framing Hichilema's involvement involvement as inappropriate. Zulu risks alienating Zambians who believe the state has a duty to honor its former leaders, regardless of political differences. ZambianObserver.com. 3. What Zambians are saying about state protocols. The controversy over Lungu's funeral has sparked widespread debate among Zambians about the role of state protocols in managing the burial of a former president. These protocols, rooted in Zambian law and tradition, dictate that former heads of state are entitled to a state funeral, which includes military honors, ceremonial rites, and burial at a designated site, such as Embassy Park in Lusaka. However, the Lungu family's resistance to these protocols has raised questions about their applicability and fairness. ZambianObserver.com. Zambian perspectives on state protocols. Public reactions to the state funeral protocols, as reflected in online discussions and media reports, are deeply divided. Support for state protocols. Many Zambians argue that the government has a legal and moral obligation to oversee Lungu's funeral, given his status as a former president. They cite the precedent of Kenneth Kaunda, Zambia's founding president, whose family's preferences were overruled in favor of a state burial at Embassy Park. Supporters of this view believe that a state funeral is a matter of national pride and unity, transcending personal or familial wishes. Some have accused the Lungu family of undermining Zambia's traditions by insisting on a private burial. ZambianObserver.com. Criticism of state involvement. Others, particularly PF supporters and those sympathetic to the Lungu family, argue that the government's insistence on a state funeral is politically motivated. They claim that the UPND is using the funeral to project an image of control and benevolence while sidelining the family's wishes. Critics also point to the government's alleged mistreatment of Lungu during his post-presidency, such as the suspension of his benefits, as evidence of bad faith. ZambianObserver.com. Calls for compromise. A significant portion of the public has called for dialogue and compromise between the government and the Lungu family. Some Zambians believe that while state protocols are important, the family's wishes should be respected to avoid further division. This view emphasizes the need for national healing during a period of mourning, rather than protracted legal and political battles. ZambianObserver.com. Cultural and legal context. In Zambia, state funerals for former presidents are governed by a combination of legal frameworks and cultural norms. The Constitution and related statutes mandate that former heads of state receive military honors and are buried at a designated site, typically Embassy Park, to symbolize their contributions to the nation. Culturally, Zambians place a high value on honoring the dead with dignity, and funerals often serve as moments of collective reflection and unity. ZambianObserver.com. However, the Lungu case has highlighted tensions between these protocols and individual rights. The family's decision to pursue a private burial in South Africa, where Lungu passed away, challenges the state's authority and raises questions about whether protocols should be flexible in cases of family dissent. Some Zambians have also questioned whether the protocols are outdated or overly rigid, particularly in light of the political divisions between the PF and UPND. Social media sentiment. Posts on X and other platforms reflect the polarized nature of the debate. Some users have accused the Lungu family and Makebi Zulu of disrespecting Zambian traditions by resisting state protocols. For example, one post suggested that the family's actions are an attempt to embarrass the UPND administration. ZambianObserver.com. Others have expressed sympathy for the family, arguing that they have a right to honor Lungu's wishes, especially given the alleged mistreatment he faced under the UPND government. ZambianObserver.com. There is also frustration with the prolonged dispute, with some Zambians calling for the government to cancel the national mourning period and allow the family to proceed privately. ZambianObserver.com. Broader implications. The debate over state protocols has broader implications for Zambia's governance and national identity. It highlights the challenges of balancing legal obligations with personal rights, particularly in a politically charged environment. The controversy has also sparked discussions about the need for clearer guidelines on state funerals to prevent similar disputes in the future. 4. The growing tension between UPND and PF during the mourning period. The mourning period following Edgar Lungu's death has been marked by escalating tensions between the UPND and PF, two of Zambia's major political parties. These tensions stem from long-standing rivalries, differing views on Lungu's legacy, and the specific circumstances surrounding his funeral arrangements. Historical context of UPND-PF rivalry. The UPND and PF have been political adversaries for over a decade, with their rivalry intensifying during Lungu's presidency 2015 to 2021. Key points of contention include 2016 and 2021 elections. The 2016 presidential election was highly contentious, with Hichilema alleging electoral fraud by the PF. In 2021, Hichilema defeated Lungu in a landslide, ending the PF's rule and ushering in UPND governance. LusakaTimes.com. Allegations of persecution. During Lungu's presidency, Hichilema faced multiple arrests and accusations of treason, which UPND supporters viewed as politically motivated. Conversely, PF supporters have accused the UPND of targeting Lungu and his associates post-2021, including through legal actions and the suspension of his benefits. ZambianObserver.com. ZambianObserver.com. PFvsUPND.com. Third term controversy. The PF's attempt to amend the constitution to allow Lungu to run for a third term, Bill 10, was a major flashpoint, with Makebi Zulu among its vocal supporters. The bill's failure and Lungu's subsequent electoral loss deepened divisions. LusakaTimes.com. Tensions during the mourning period. Lungu's death and the subsequent funeral dispute have reignited these tensions, with several key developments. Family versus government dispute. The Lungu family's refusal to allow the government to oversee the funeral has been framed by some PF supporters as a response to UPND's alleged vendetta against Lungu. Makebi Zulu's statements have amplified this narrative, accusing the government of insensitivity and deceit. ZambianObserver.com. Legal battle in South Africa. The Zambian government's lawsuit to repatriate Lungu's body has been viewed by PF supporters as an attempt to assert control and diminish the family's autonomy. The involvement of the South African court has further complicated the situation, with Zulu named as a defendant alongside Lungu's family members. ZambianObserver.com. Intra-PF discord. The dispute has also exposed divisions within the PF. For example, senior PF member Given Labinda publicly criticized Zulu for failing to communicate plans about the repatriation of Lungu's body, leading to embarrassment when PF members waited at the airport for a body that never arrived. ZambianObserver.com. Public polarization. The mourning period has seen heated exchanges on social media, with UPND supporters accusing the PF of politicizing Lungu's death, while PF supporters claim the UPND is disrespecting Lungu's legacy. ZambianObserver.com. ZambianObserver.com. Impact on national unity. The growing tensions have undermined efforts to foster national unity during the mourning period. Lungu's death was initially seen as an opportunity for Zambians to come together in honoring a former president, but the dispute has instead deepened political divisions. Some analysts have warned that the controversy could have long-term consequences for Zambia's stability, particularly as the 2026 elections approach. ZambianObserver.com. Efforts at resolution. Despite the tensions, there have been calls for dialogue. Former regional leaders have reportedly attempted to mediate between the government and the Lungu family, though these efforts have collapsed. President Hichilema has also met with South African officials to discuss the repatriation of Lungu's remains, indicating a desire to resolve the issue diplomatically. However, the lack of progress in negotiations suggests that both sides remain entrenched in their positions. ZambianObserver.com. ZambianObserver.com. 5. Lungu's legacy and national impact. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, Zambia's 6th president, served from 2015 to 2021 and left a complex legacy that continues to shape public and political discourse. His death has prompted reflection on his contributions, controversies, and the broader impact of his presidency on Zambia. Lungu's achievements. Infrastructure development. Lungu's administration oversaw significant infrastructure projects, including the expansion of airports and roads. Supporters argue that these developments improved connectivity and economic opportunities. ZambianObserver.com. Healthcare access. Lungu's government made efforts to expand healthcare access, though critics note that he himself faced challenges accessing medical care post-presidency. ZambianObserver.com. Regional diplomacy. Lungu was praised for his humility and willingness to learn from mistakes, as noted by former South African High Commissioner George Tiwala. ZambianObserver.com. Controversies. Economic challenges. Lungu's presidency was marked by economic difficulties, including rising debt and allegations of mismanagement. Critics argue that his financial struggles post-presidency were a result of mismanaging state resources. ZambianObserver.com. Corruption allegations. The PF government faced accusations of corruption, with some claiming that Lungu and his associates amassed wealth illicitly. These allegations have fueled public skepticism about his legacy. LusakaTimes.com. Third term bid. Lungu's attempt to run for a third term through Bill 10 was highly controversial, with Makebi Zulu among its defenders. The bid was seen as an attempt to undermine democratic principles. LusakaTimes.com. National impact. Lungu's death has had a profound impact on Zambia, both emotionally and politically. National mourning. The announcement of Lungu's death prompted a period of national mourning, with Zambians reflecting on his contributions and the challenges of his presidency. ZambianObserver.com. Political polarization. The funeral dispute has reignited debates about Lungu's legacy, with PF supporters emphasizing his achievements and UPND supporters focusing on his controversies. ZambianObserver.com. Legacy re-evaluation. The controversy has prompted discussions about how Zambia honors its former leaders and whether state protocols adequately balance respect for the deceased with public expectations. 6. State funeral protocols in Zambia. As discussed earlier, Zambia's state funeral protocols mandate that former presidents receive military honors and are buried at a designated site, typically Embassy Park. These protocols are designed to honor the contributions of former heads of state and foster national national unity. However, the Lungu case has highlighted challenges in their implementation. Legal framework. The protocols are rooted in Zambian law, which prioritizes public interest over personal wishes. The precedent of Kenneth Konda's burial illustrates this principle. ZambianObserver.com. Family rights. The Lungu family's insistence on a private burial challenges the state's authority, raising questions about the balance between legal obligations and individual rights. Political sensitivities. The protocols assume a degree of consensus between the government and the deceased's family, which is absent in this case due to political tensions. 7. PF versus UPND political tensions. The tensions between the PF and UPND during the mourning period are a continuation of their long-standing rivalry. Key points include mutual accusations. The PF accuses the UPND of disrespecting Lungu's legacy, while the UPND accuses the PF of politicizing his death. ZambianObserver.com. Legal and political maneuvering. The legal battle in South Africa and public statements by figures like Makebi Zulu have escalated the conflict, with both sides seeking to control the narrative. Impact on 2026 elections. The dispute could influence public perceptions of both parties as Zambia approaches the 2026 elections, with each side aiming to gain political capital. 8. Zambians react to the controversy. Zambian reactions to the controversy are varied, reflecting the country's political and social divisions. Support for the family. Some Zambians, particularly PF supporters, sympathize with the Lungu family's desire for a private burial and view the government's actions as overreach. ZambianObserver.com. Support for the government. Others believe the government is acting within its rights and responsibilities, emphasizing the importance of state protocols. ZambianObserver.com. Calls for unity. Many Zambians are frustrated with the politicization of the issue and are calling for both sides to prioritize national healing. ZambianObserver.com. 9. What happens next? Will HH respond? The future of the controversy depends on several factors. Legal outcome. The High Court in Pretoria's ruling will determine whether Lungu's body is repatriated to Zambia or buried in South Africa. The court has asked the Zambian government to file an application by July 3, 2025, stating reasons for repatriation. ZambianObserver.com. Government response. President Hichilema has not directly responded to Zulu's statements, but his administration's actions, including the lawsuit and diplomatic efforts, suggest a commitment to securing a state funeral. ZambianObserver.com. Public pressure. Growing public frustration could push both sides toward compromise, though entrenched positions make this challenging. Potential scenarios. If the court rules in favor of the government, Lungu's body may be repatriated for a state funeral, potentially easing tensions but alienating the family. If the family prevails, the private burial could deepen political divisions. Conclusion. The controversy surrounding Makebi Zulu's statements, the Lungu family's demands, and the government's response reflects deeper issues of trust, power, and national identity in Zambia. While Zulu's outspokenness has brought attention to the family's grievances, it has also intensified political tensions and complicated the mourning process. The debate over state protocols highlights the need for clearer guidelines and greater sensitivity in handling such matters. As Zambia navigates this challenging period, the resolution of the dispute will likely shape public perceptions of both the UPND and PF, with implications for the country's political future.